Good morning and welcome to our celebration of Guru Purnima. It's a very nice sunny day, so I hope we'll get a few more people joining us in person in spite of the scare at the moment about the COVID flaring up again. And welcome to those of you who have already joined us via Zoom. We'll start with some chanting by the Sri Sarada Nuns. Then Pravrajika Gayatripana will give a talk, and then I'll be presenting my Vedanta Memoirs, of which there's quite a lot, of course. I hope it'll be interesting for you. And then we will be having an open forum, as we always do. You're invited to come up and talk about how Vedanta and your guru has helped you. So we do hope some of you can come up and share your thoughts. And then we'll be distributing some lunch packets. So now I'll invite Sri Gayatripana and Yaprapana to come and do some chanting.
Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Aneka Janma Samprapta Karmendana Vidahine Atmajnanagnidanena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mannatha Shri Jagannatho Madguru Shri Jagadguru Madatma Sarvabhutatma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Brahmanandam Paramasukhadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasya-dilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami.
Om Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Salutations to the Guru who has made it possible to realize him, by whom this entire universe of movable and immovable objects is pervaded. This year, Guru Purnima was on the 13th, last Wednesday, and we are celebrating today. Guru Purnima is also referred to as Vyasa Purnima, the birthday of sage Vyasa. Vedanta asserts that the aim of life is God realization or self-realization. Now, how are we to achieve this aim? Swami Vivekananda says, get the mercy of God and his greatest children. These are the two chief ways to God. The company of these children of light is very hard to get. 5 minutes in their company will change a whole life. And if you really want it enough, one will come to you. So that's Swamiji's instructions. The two main paths to get God realization or self-realization is get the mercy of God and his greatest of children, the great realized souls. And the company of the realized souls is so great. A few minutes in their company is enough to change the whole life. And how are we to find? How do we get it? Swamiji says, if you really want it, if you're really thirsting for it, you'll surely get. One will come to you. Now we see that a lot of people study about Vedanta, all the scriptures, but there's a great difference between intellectual understanding, intellectual development, and spiritual growth. A great scholar, well-versed in all the scriptures, studied all the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, and all the other scriptures, may be able to give wonderful lectures and expound them, teach them. But often, I'm not saying always, but often we see that in their life, they fail to act. They don't practice. They speak about it. They are scholars, they are lecturers, or speak for professors. But there's a big difference between those who speak of all these things and those who practice. Intellectual understanding hasn't made any change in their life. Ordinary sciences or arts, history, we don't look at the life of the person. Whatever be their life, we just get the teaching. But in spirituality, we look at the person's life. And the impulse for spiritual development cannot come from books. However many books you have studied, you may not progress spiritually. That impulse for spiritual progress doesn't come from books, from outside. It can come only from another soul. And that particular person or soul that gives you that impulse, we call the Guru. And as Swamiji says earlier, if you really want, you'll get the Guru. You'll come across a Guru. Now, what does a Guru do? He confers freedom from bondage. The attachment to the world, objects of the world, its possessions, lust, anger, and other emotions, egotism, the feeling of I and mine, all these bind us. These make us forget our real nature, what we really are. We are really divine being that we forget. And we identify ourselves with this body, mind, and all the other things associated with that. Guru awakens that memory. He awakens from the slumber of the ignorance, reminds us of our real nature, and shows us the path to freedom. Shankaracharya, in a short work called the Prashnottara Mala, it's a garland of question and answers. He puts a question and gives the answers. One question is, who is the Guru? And he answers, he who teaches what is beneficial for the disciple. That's what the Guru does. Teaches what is beneficial for the disciple. So you have to remember there's a great difference between what is pleasant and what is beneficial. In the Katha Upanishad, we come across Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas is what is beneficial. What is pleasant may not be beneficial. We want all pleasant things. We want to hear pleasant words, pleasing acts, but they may not be beneficial for us. The Guru teaches what is beneficial, for our spiritual growth. And such a Guru has got a certain qualifications. And again, to quote Shankaracharya, in the Vivek Chudamani, he gives the qualifications of the Guru. Guru is a person who is well versed in the Vedas, sinless, unsmitten by desires, and a knower of Brahman par excellence, who has achieved tranquility in Brahman, who is calm, like the fire that has consumed its fuel, who is a boundless reservoir of mercy that knows no motive, and a friend of all good people who prostrate themselves before him. This is the definition of a Guru. Look at all these different qualities Shankaracharya mentions. Who is well versed in the Vedas? Just like any professor? No, knows the spirit of the scriptures, not just the letter, what it says. No, the Guru knows, the real Guru knows the spirit of the scriptures. And then sinless, completely free from any sins, any evils, unsmitten by desires. If the Guru is free from all desires. Desires, human mind is full of desires. And it is these desires which prompt us to do different actions. Many times we go on doing actions and bind us ourselves because of these desires. The Guru is free from desires because his mind has fulfilled all desires. That's they say. When the mind is has fulfilled all the desires, he is apta kama. All the desires have been fulfilled. In our case, ordinary people, you fulfill one desire, immediately the next one comes forward. You fulfill that, next one comes. It's unending line of desires. But Guru has fulfilled all the desires. He is apta kama. Now, since all the desires have been fulfilled, there is no desire in his mind. So he is akama. That doesn't mean that just a vacuum. No, we say nature abhors vacuum. No, he has filled his mind the desire for the highest reality, Brahman. So he has become Atma Kama. This is how the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad describes the great teacher. He is Apta Kama, all the desires have been fulfilled. Akama, without any desire. Atma Kama. The only desire is for the highest reality. Then he is a knower of Brahman. He has realized his unity with Brahman. He has realized that he is one with Brahman. Who is calm, like the fire that has consumed its fuel. In ordinary people, the fire of desire is burning strong. But in the Guru, as we said, all the desires have been fulfilled. So the fire of desire has burned down. So there is no movement, it is calm. Who is a boundless reservoir of mercy that knows no motive. Why does the Guru help the disciple? For any particular motive? No. His mercy is without any motive. Often, because we always expect, we don't do anything without expecting something from other people. When the motiveless love comes, concern comes, we get suspicious. Just to quote a small example from incident from the life of Sri Ramakrishna, there's a young disciple, Niranjan, who later became Swami Niranjanananda. One day when Niranjan came, in the early days, his second visit, Sri Ramakrishna went up to him as soon as he saw the young man coming. Oh, Niranjan, When will you realize God? I'm so worried as to when you will realize God. Days are going. When will you realize God? And Niranjan got surprised. Why is he so concerned that I haven't realized God? It's motiveless love, motiveless compassion, mercy. That's a real guru. The real guru is a boundless reservoir of mercy that knows no motive. And he is a friend of all good people who prostrate themselves before him, who bow down to him. And to benefit from such a guru, the disciple should have certain qualities. Again, to quote from what Shankaracharya says in the Prashnottara Mala, who is a disciple? The first question we ask, who is a guru? And then he asks, who is a disciple? The disciple is he who is devoted to the guru. In other words, one who obeys the guru's precepts and serves him. The disciple obeys the guru's precepts and serves the guru. He is devoted to the guru. It's a preliminary to knowing God. One must learn to surrender oneself to a spiritual authority whom we can see and surrender gladly, surrender with love. By our surrendering to the teacher is not going to gain anything. It's for our sake. We benefit. If we cannot surrender ourselves completely to the God that we can see, how are we going to worship the God that we don't see? Guru is God himself. Sri Ramakrishna says again and again, Satchidananda himself is the Guru. And that Guru, the living God, in the form of our Guru, if we can't surrender and worship, then how are we going to worship the God that we don't see? At present, God is just an image or an idol for us. It's not a living entity. Till then, we have to go through Guru. But when it comes, we back away from that. We say, how can I surrender myself to another person? Because we forget that God is, Guru is not the human being who has given some spiritual instructions, but Satchidananda, the supreme reality, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, but taken a particular form for our sake. That's why Sri Ramakrishna again and again he says, Satchidananda alone is the Guru. Our Guru is the particular form, the particular manifestation of Satchidananda for our sake. We are not able to directly see or contact or interact with the supreme reality. We haven't reached that stage. So we have got go through the medium of the Guru. It's like the Guru is like the hole in the screen, that example Sri Ramakrishna gives. There's a hole in the screen. Now, whatever be the shape of the hole, you look through that hole to the scenery out, you see in that the scenery in the shape of that particular hole. If it is a square hole, you see only the square part. If it is a round hole, you see the round part. Our Guru is that particular hole for our, it has taken that for our sake. Don't look upon Guru as a human being. When we look on Guru as a human being, we are making a big mistake. We see the drawbacks. As a human being, everybody has got his or her peculiarities and drawbacks. But we have to remember, Guru is not a human being. Guru is God coming through that particular human being. It's just like water coming through different taps. In olden times, on the roof, the water falls on the eaves, there will be small spouts or holes for the water to come to pour out. Some may be in the shape of the mouth of a lion, some could be the mouth of a cow, but the same water coming from the rainwater. Whether it's coming through a big pipe or one of the big mains or a small tap, it's the same water coming from the storage area. The Guru's power comes from God. Obedience to spiritual preceptor is given a high place in not just Hinduism, but other faiths also. We see that. Thomas A. Kempis, in The Imitation of Christ, recommends loving obedience to one's spiritual superior, religious superior. And according to the Vajrayana Buddhism, the Guru is the Buddha, the Guru is Dhamma, the Guru is the Sangha, the Guru is Vajradhara, the only means to awakening. In Sikhism, the Guru is considered as a spiritual authority as well as temporal authority. And Holy Mother says, in spiritual matters, you obey the Guru implicitly, without making any change, whatever in the spiritual matters. But in mundane matters, in temporal matters, use your own intelligence. If in spiritual matters, if you use your intelligence, you may be doing something wrong. So in spiritual matters, follow the instructions of the Guru implicitly. And service to an enlightened Guru is considered as greater than worship of God. When we worship God, the results that we get, it's not visible always, because the result of worship of God is purity of mind. Purity of mind is not always visible. You cannot see all the time, understand. But worship of Guru is both seen and unseen. Seen is you get the instructions from the Guru, that's directly visible, and unseen, purity of mind. We get both. That is why Kabir says, if Guru and God are come and stand in front of you at the same time, whom will you salute first? Guru and God are standing, has appeared before you at the same time. Whom will you salute first? We salute the Guru, because Guru takes us to God. It is only through Guru we can reach God. Without the help of Guru, we cannot reach God. And so that's why Bhagavad Gita says service to Guru is very important. It says, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprasnena seveya. Learn from the Guru by saluting and doing service to them. Saluting means surrendering to God, surrendering to the Guru, showing humility, have humility. And through that, you get their grace. Through Guru's grace, you will reach the highest realization, reach God. There are many examples that we have see how a completely illiterate person attained the highest realization, enlightenment, just through the grace of the Guru. Most of you know about Swami Adbhutananda Lattu Maharaj, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. He was completely illiterate. He didn't even know the alphabets. Sri Ramakrishna tried to teach him the alphabets, but Sri Ramakrishna being from Bengal and Lattu Maharaj, Swami Adbhutananda being from Bihar, the pronunciation didn't go, and Sri Ramakrishna failed to teach him even the first few alphabets. Sri Ramakrishna said, "No, you don't have to study this." But later, he had the highest realization. All these truths described in the scriptures, it was on the tip of his tongue. He had his highest realization just by the grace of the Guru. And another example we know very well is one of the disciples of Shankaracharya. he has a disciple by name Giri, who was very dull-witted. One day, Shankaracharya was ready to start the morning instructions class, but Giri was still doing some personal service, doing things for that Guru, and he was waiting. Then the other disciples, like Padmapada and others who were highly intelligent, they said, why don't you start? He said, oh, waiting for Giri. Waiting for Giri, waiting for Giri and waiting for the wall is almost the same. Shankara felt really bad at the way they were ridiculing Giri, and he just mentally blessed Giri. Within a short time, Giri came to the teacher, extempo uttering a hymn in praise of Shankaracharya. And in a particular meter called Totaka, and there was such a soul stirring, and the other disciples were surprised. Where did all this knowledge come from? Just from the blessing, the grace of the Guru. And that afterwards he came to be known as Totakacharya because he uttered that hymn in the Totaka meter. So Guru's grace will give you everything. Now, how are we to serve the Guru if Guru is no longer in the body, or we are far away? Now, early days, in olden times, people stayed in the Guru's Gurukula or in same place, under the same roof. There was chance to serve Guru. But what happened nowadays? Far away, or if Guru has left the body. Swami Virajananda says, he was a disciple of Holy Mother and he had his sannyasa from Swami Vivekananda. He says, doing the spiritual practices regularly as instructed by the Guru is the best form of service to Guru. Nobody can say, I can't serve the Guru, because this is the best form of service to Guru is doing the spiritual practices as instructed by the Guru. We all have to do it. And that's the best service to Guru. And when many people get only one chance to see the Guru, afterward they don't see. Then how are we to? This is the way. Serve the Guru by doing the spiritual practices as instructed by the Guru. And that will give you all the benefit. Like one of our Madajis, she was a disciple of Swami Virajananda and had met him only at the time of initiation. Afterwards, she never got a chance to see. So she was telling our first president Maharaji, Bharatipana Maharaji. Many of you have seen the short life of documentary of Bharatipana Maharaji. That she didn't get a chance to contact her Guru afterwards. She said, don't worry. You do your spiritual practices. At the last moment, your Guru will come and take you by the hand. And when she passed away, I heard that she passed away on the birthday of her Guru. Swami Virajananda's birthday, she passed away. And they say she was just stretching the hand like that, as though giving the hand to somebody. So it literally happens. When you do your spiritual practices, as instructed by the Guru will come and take you. Sri Ramakrishna says, Guru leads the student and disciple by the hand and then say, this is your Ishta, this is your chosen deity, and then gets merged in the chosen deity. But unless that disciple is prepared, cannot benefit from the instructions of the teacher. We speak about the Guru, but to benefit from the Guru, benefit from the instructions of the Guru, the disciple must be ready, must be prepared. Say there is 2 fields or 2 garden beds. One, you have prepared everything nicely, removed all the stones and pebbles and everything, put manure, watered, and then put the seeds. The seeds will sprout and you get a good yield. The other bed is not prepared at all. Then what happens? When you put the seeds may sprout, may not sprout. Even if it is sprouting, it may not grow. So it's our mind is like that. We must be prepared. The disciple must be prepared to benefit from the instructions of the Guru. The true seeker with faith and humility will benefit and attain freedom, while the worldly person remains bound, just like the unprepared plot of land. The worldly person may be doing the spiritual practices or doing the japa, but it is like rowing the boat which is still anchored. The anchor has been lifted. Sri Ramakrishna gives a story. A few drunkards, at night they decided they will go for a joy ride. There's a boat there in the let's go on a boat ride. They got into the boat and started rowing. The whole night they rowed. And then the daybreak, they became sober and found that they are in the same spot because nobody thought of lifting the anchor. Worldly persons' spiritual practices is like that. They are doing spiritual practices, but the mind is full of desires. And Sri Ramakrishna says those desires are the holes through which all the practices, whatever you are doing, is flowing out. The mind, we have to make it desireless. Only then we will be able to progress. And meditating on the form of the Guru make us more and more desireless. That helps us to become desireless and progress on the spiritual path. In the Guru Gita it says, Dhyana Moolam Guror Murti, Puja Moolam Guru Padam, Mantra Moolam Guror Vakyam, Moksha Moolam Guru Kripa. Meditate on the form of the Guru. Worship Guru's feet. Practice the words of Guru like the mantra. And one gets liberation by the grace of the Guru. Only through grace of Guru we'll be able to attain the highest. Let's pray that the Supreme Guru Satchidananda and all the other Gurus, the various manifestations of that Supreme Guru, bless us and lead us on the spiritual path. Thank you.
As part of the program, I'm going to share my Vedanta memoirs, although I'm going to go back to pre-Vedanta times just to give you a bit of brief information about my background, so don't mind that. It's all, a lot of it's part of my spiritual journey, you would say. So you can start the share, Fred. Yeah, next slide. That's it. So that's a picture in 1960. I'm the baby there in my mother's arms, being rather restless as I believe I was. And I was the youngest out of the four. And we, yeah, a little, maybe about 1 or 2 years old there. But the family moved from Wollongong. I was born in Wollongong, and we moved to Borkham Hills in 1960. So I grew up in Borkham Hills. My father was a high school teacher, mathematics, but in addition to his mathematics job, he ran a veritable mathematics tuition college from home. And to give you an idea, there would be about 7 or 8 students for each 1 hour lesson. And there were at least 16 one-hour lessons per week that he was running from home. And it all built up from word of mouth. I mean, I'm not saying this, he was a very good teacher and he loved mathematics. So I think that all helped with his spreading the word and encouraging people to come for his classes. Because of that, I will say we grew up in pretty prosperous circumstances. And it was really a golden time in my life. Porkham Hills is a beautiful area, especially back in those times. And the country itself, Australia as such, was passing through a boom time. So it was a great time to grow up. You can go to the next slide, Fred. Now, in the background as I was growing up, that's 1960s, 1970s, there was a lot of change occurring throughout the Western world. Young people around the world were shaking off the overly narrow sort of thinking. You saw on that first slide there, the Beatles, they went and learnt meditation. And for a lot of us, we started hearing about meditation as we were growing up. And on TV, a very popular series back then was Kung Fu. And it centers around that character there. He's a mixed race, American Chinese man. And he's trained by the monks in a Buddhist monastery in China. And later he ends up in America. But anyway, there'd be scenes with him meditating. And I remember growing up, I'd be fascinated by that. So I'm building a picture here. There are these influences and ideas coming in via popular culture. And similarly, Star Trek. In Star Trek, many of the episodes, the writers very definitely had delved into Eastern philosophy. And some of those ideas were coming out in the episodes. And for us, it was fascinating. Even Mataji loved Star Trek. When she came to Australia, she used to be on every afternoon, and Mataji and Gayatripana would watch it. We'd all watch it together. And every now and again in some episodes, Mataji would say, "That's Vedanta, that's Vedanta." So it was a very good sort of way to introduce me to such ideas. Go to the next slide, Fred. Now, in my early teenage years, I'm going to get very personal here. These are things I've never told anybody. When I was about 12 or 13, I had some premonitions. When I was about 12 or 13, one night I'd gone to bed and suddenly I was full of fear. And the fear was, I thought, what will happen when my parents are gone? Now, at that time, my mother was late 40s. My father was early 50s. They're quite healthy. There was no reason for me to have that fear. And so part of my mind said, why are you worrying? There's nothing to fear about that. But then just a couple of years later, my mother was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. And she passed away when I was 15. So that was an eye-opener, of course. I did remember this premonition I had. But then 2 years later, my father was killed in a car crash. So I don't know what you make of that, but I had a very strong feeling they weren't going to live long. Around that time, I had another curious experience. And one day I found I fell into a very serious mood. And it was like there was an older, wiser version of myself in my head talking to me. And it was saying that in a few years' time, I'm going to start on a journey. And it's a journey that's unimaginable to me at that time in my young teens. Then the mood lifted and I was sort of puzzled and intrigued. What happened there? What was that all about? How did that happen? But then I did remember that a few years later, because a few years later is when I then started on this journey of, I came across meditation and yoga and Vedanta. So I was recalling that experience. I thought, yes, that was again like some premonition. Then another day around that time in my early teens, and this is really quite a striking experience, just out of nowhere, I suddenly stopped and I heard a voice telling me, I heard three words echoing through my mind. Who am I? And along with those three words, I had a very curious otherworldly feeling. Now, I don't know, if you ask me, of course I believe in reincarnation, and I wonder, it was almost like it was a voice coming from a previous life. And I'm telling you, these are quite significant experiences for me. They had quite an impact. And then finally, just one more experience around that time. There used to be a chain of stores at that time called Costless Imports. And there was one of them was in Parramatta, my local shopping area, and they stocked furniture and handicrafts and clothing from India and Bali and Asia. And I felt so drawn to that shop, and I'd wander and spend happy times in there just wandering around. And I do remember very clearly that they had incense there, and I stopped, and the incense had pictures of Krishna on the packet. And I remember standing there transfixed, and I felt this real link with it. So I bought the incense, and this is when I was probably about 14. And from then on, I started burning incense in my room. So I'm just saying all this because Australia back then was totally Anglo society. I was living in white bread, white flour, Christian Anglo world. So I do look back and think that's quite interesting how I felt like that. Now, the death of my mother when I was 15 added grief to other problems. At school, I became a target of bullies. It's not easy to talk about this, but it's going to help you understand my background and what I went through. So I was the one who got teased and bullied and beaten up. And I had a very unfortunate way of trying to deal with that. I tried to be friends with them. And of course, that actually made it worse. It just drew more attention to me. So back then, in those times, if you were bullied, people would say, "Oh, just toughen up and fight back." But I wasn't able to do that. And anyway, it was like a gang situation. If I did stand up to one of them, then the whole lot had come after me. So you would just keep a low profile and try and keep out of the way as much as you could. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Fred. Now, having, especially after my father was killed in a car crash, you know, I'm still young. So when you're young, if you remember, you're full of energy, you're full of optimism, your whole life's ahead of you. So I thought I'd taken it pretty well and I was getting on with life and I'm pretty happy-go-lucky. I was working, I had a good job, but I wasn't quite well. So providentially, my sister and her family, they had a farm up in Burringbar, very beautiful area up near Moolumbar. So I decided with her encouragement to go and live with them. And that was a very good move to do. And it was a move that had mixed results. Externally, I'm living in paradise. I was a keen surfer. I'd go, that was the local break, Cabarita. So I was living in a beautiful area. I'd go surfing and I'd help out on my sister's farm and she had milking cows. And I remember she'd milk the cows each morning. I remember churning, making cream from the milk and have it on homemade bread. And so like that, there were many very good things. But all those things that had happened to me in those previous few years, that had all gone in deep. So I'd get into very dark moods and I was very confused. So one day I was sitting alone on a hillside on my sister's farm and I did something I'd never done before. At that time I was an agnostic. I went to Sunday school, but rather reluctantly. I never became a devout Christian, so to say. But anyway, sitting on that hill, I prayed. And I prayed to something I didn't think existed, but that I really needed to exist. And the prayer was, if there is a God, if there is something more, if there's something meaningful behind what I was viewing as a rather cruel world, then give me proof. I could never believe. I needed proof. So it was a prayer of desperation, and I really didn't expect anything much to come from it. But anyway, that prayer welled up, and I expressed it. Now, around that time, I had started to dabble in meditation, and the Brahma Kumaris had a center nearby, and I did a meditation course with them. And if you don't know, they have an unusual technique of meditation. They meditate with the eyes open. And you would think it's a bit intimidating, but when I did the course, the teacher would sit in front of you and look at you and look into your eyes or into your soul, as they would put it. But then I had very good peaceful meditations. It was a very peaceful atmosphere. And when you'd sit for meditation, you would tell yourself, I am a soul, a pure soul. So I was finding that very helpful, just what I needed. Then one afternoon, they had an event where there was a group meditation. And the group meditation, this hall there was the local Baringbar Hall. And right up at the end there, there's a grassy embankment. And we sat out there in the sun. It was a nice sunny afternoon. And we're looking over a valley, and we had this open-eyed meditation. Now, I'm going to tell you something which I've never told anybody, but probably the most important thing that ever happened in my life. And I hope you'll understand it. And as I sat there, I was settling in, trying to gather my mind, as you do when you sit in meditation. Actually, Fred, you can stop the share. And I had an experience, and I felt a surge of energy rising up within me. That was the first thing I noticed. And then with the open-eyed meditation, I found that the valley in front of me and everything around me was becoming bathed in a really beautiful divine light. And along with this, I was starting to feel an incredible sense of peace. I mean, incomparable to anything I'd ever felt. And there was this intense clarity and stillness. And gradually the experience started to deepen. And I was still, well, I was finding I was no longer aware of my body. And I was starting to lose all sense of my individuality. To my regret, I became frightened. And with that, the experience immediately backed off. And I returned to the everyday world again. And I don't suppose the experience lasted very long, but I remember the others that were there were looking at me when I came out of it. But look, anyway, of course, what I then decided was, there you go, I prayed, I wanted proof. And the way I interpreted it was that I got a glimpse, a little brief glimpse of what I really am, what all of us really are. And that is something amazing as we keep reading in all these scriptures. And it gave me a lot of hope too, because what I also read into that was, look, no matter how hard life is, this is what's waiting for us. Everything works out well in the end. And even when you think about it with Vedanta, what are we trying to do? We are trying to ultimately get out of the cycle of birth and death and merge in the infinite. Now, we read about this and we talk about it, but when you think about it, that's pretty radical. We're actually aiming to lose all sense of our individuality. And I found with this experience that when the time comes and you're ready, you will very willingly give up your individuality. You will joyfully go into that state. But of course, in this case, this somehow was something that came up and I hadn't done the preparation to be able to go deeper into an experience like that. I wasn't ready. But anyway, as you can imagine, I think it's the greatest blessing and the greatest thing that in my life. I've never had any experience since then that comes anywhere near that. And I've got to say, a couple of years later, when I was reading Swami Vivekananda's first lecture at the World Parliament of Religions, and there was one sentence in that speech that really leapt out at me, where he said that we are the heirs of immortal bliss. And I just nodded. I thought, yes, it's true. I mean, the other thing is, I don't want to overstate the impact of this experience. I came out of that a bit wiser, but I definitely wasn't a wise man. I was still a very ordinary person. After that, I lived a very ordinary life, but this was, the memory of that was always in the background. And of course, gave me the conviction that this is what's waiting for us, and it's worth striving to try and reach for that. So go to the next slide. Right? Yeah, share the slide. Yeah, got to share. So then, after that experience, not long after that, I moved back to Sydney, and I shared a house with some friends in Castle Hill on Acreage, and that was a really wonderful time. We were mainly vegetarian. They were all university students. Very idealistic group we were. We avoided fast and processed foods. Very much, we were healthy-minded people, healthy lifestyle-minded people. On Saturday mornings, we'd go to Russell's Health Food and Glebe and stock up on tubs of dark, strong honey from Tasmania. We get bags of raw mixed nuts, dried bananas, figs, lentils, muesli. We were spending a lot of money on food, actually. We were eating like kings because we weren't going out night clubbing and going to pubs or gambling or all that sort of thing that drains young people's money. And interestingly, we had a household bookshelf, and on the bookshelf, we had a collection of books that we shared. There were things like, say, John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul. I mean, one of the housemates was Catholic, devout Catholic. The Imitation of Christ. We had the Tao of Physics. That was Fritjof Capra's book on the parallels between Eastern mysticism and modern physics. I mean, we were intellectuals. We had Dr. Richard Alpert's consciousness book, Be Here Now. He was better known as Ram Dass. We had Rachel Carson's seminal book called Silent Spring, where there's this growing awareness of environmentalism and the impact of chemicals on the environment. We had Hermann Hesse's Buddhist theme classic, Siddhartha. And later on, I added the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna to the collection once I came into contact with the society. So anyway, that's just giving you a bit of a picture. It was a really very creative and inspiring time. I was feeling very positive. My mind was clear. And then I came across this magazine, Cosmos, brought out each month by Yvonne Malik. And with Yvonne, I did a meditation course and also yoga. She was teaching yoga. And in the meditation course, she gave a book list of recommended reading. And in that book list, she had books on and by Swami Vivekananda. She had The Life of Ramakrishna, Vedanta for the Western World, and so on. So really, that's when, this was 1980, this is when I came into contact with Vedanta and the Ramakrishna movement. And also then through Yvonne, I learned that a monk of the Ramakrishna order was coming to visit Australia on his annual world lecture tour, and that was Swami Ranganathananda. So if you could just go to the next slide, Reb. And this was another big turning point. This Swami, I think as many of you know, he was a spiritual giant. I attended his lectures at the Fred Hutley Hall in North Sydney. He gave a series of talks. And from that, I was inspired to attend a weekend retreat with the Swami up in the Blue Mountains. And I remember on the Saturday morning, he was speaking on the Mandukya Upanishad, and quite technical. I didn't know much about the Upanishads, but what happened was you were grappling, trying to understand his commentary, but then on the other hand, there was a spiritual atmosphere there. I mean, a really deep spiritual atmosphere. I felt it and the others felt it, which I think the Swami, being in close quarters with him, that would happen. And so I almost thought sometimes I'm learning more from this spiritual atmosphere than I am from the class. You know, you were just feeling what you were experiencing with the Swami was also so instructive. But for me and the others there, during lunchtime, because there were a few of us there who were meeting him for the first time, and we knew this is something extraordinary. We've come across a real sage here. We just knew it. It was obvious. And we just marveled at our good fortune. So I stayed there for the weekend. The retreat continued for about a week. Before we move on, before I talk about that, the Swami used to be sent out on world lecture tours by the government of India. He was the government of India's spiritual cultural representative for some years. And so knowing that, he was quite keen to be interviewed by the media. So on his last visit to Australia in 1986, we got a bit more organized, and I prepared a press release and got him into the media. And one of the highlights, a very proud moment for me, was when we managed to get him on the Ray Martin show. And many of you know Ray Martin's a very renowned journalist here. And at that time, he had a midday variety program broadcast nationally. And the Swami appeared on that. And what happened after the interview, we were getting phone calls from all around the country, people asking, who is that man? And Ray Martin was very good too. He understood that this is someone of great substance, and he was quite respectful, and the interview went very well. But you can stop the share, Fred. I've just got a bit more to say about the Swami, and we'll move on. Now, at the retreat, here's another experience I'm sharing, so don't mind. I'm just being open here and sharing you some of the experiences I've had. When I left the retreat reluctantly and kind of wishing I'd booked in for the whole week, I had to, so it's up in the Blue Mountains, so I was driving alone back to Sydney. And I found when I came out of the retreat, of course, I felt very peaceful. But as I was driving alone in the car, I was studying myself, and I found, wait on, this is a different type of peace I'm feeling. And it's hard to describe, but it was like an unwavering peace, is the way I would put it. And I was in that very, very peaceful state of mind for the next 2 or 3 days, and then it gradually faded. But I believe what happened was, I believe the Swami had the power to do that, to put you into a kind of a spiritual mood. I think maybe I was cooperating. Maybe he couldn't just do it on his own. Maybe I had to be ready and be in the right frame of mind. But I took it, the way I took it was him encouraging me and pursue this and go deep into it. So anyway, that's just another little experience there. I mean, the other fond memory with the Swami was that in subsequent retreats, a few of us closer devotees, we would sit with the Swami. He would have his dinner after everybody else at the retreat had theirs. And a few of us would sit around the table and keep company with him while he was having his dinner. And as I said, because he had been sent out as the representative of the Indian government to give lecture tours, he met many of the leaders of Asia and spent time with them. And so when we were with him and we were like an intimate little group, he'd open up and share anecdotes about his meetings and the time he spent with some of these world leaders and what he told them, what books he gave them and how they responded. And sometimes they would attend his talks. And it was just fascinating. I wish I'd noted it down. We had a recording, but it was really inspiring and fascinating. And he was a world thinker, so he expressed some opinions, and he had a very good sense of humor. So I really treasured memories, the time we got with him. So then share and go to the next slide, Fred. In 1983, this was after I met Mataji, and I'll come back to that. But I went to India for the first time, and I spent 3 months there. And it was an opportunity to really get to know the Ramakrishna order. And I had some really special experiences there. I traveled around for part of the trip with 2 of the monks of the order. The first picture there is where I first stayed. That's the Hyderabad Mat, Ramakrishna Mat. And way off on the stage there, that's Swami Ranganathananda giving a talk. He had a special series of talks when I was there, and you'd get, a few thousand people coming each night for his talks, sitting in the courtyard of the ashrama. So that was really a nice experience to be there at that time. And this Swami here, that's Swami Sarada ji. He was a disciple of Holy Mother. He served Holy Mother. And back then he was in the Vrindavan Ramakrishna mission. And he's a very interesting Swami. He walked around India, all around India in his younger days, like Swami Vivekananda did. And at this time, he had a lot of arthritis, but I saw each morning he would go, each morning he would go to the shrine, and with the help of a brahmachari, he'd wipe the floor of the shrine, and he could barely stand, a lot of pain. And we were asking, why are you doing that, Swamiji? And he said, as long as I'm living under the roof of Sri Ramakrishna, I have to do some service. I remember that. Then down in the bottom left-hand corner, I had gone to Uti, up in the mountains on the Western Ghats. And I went along with a lot of the monks, and they had the installation ceremony of the statue of Sri Ramakrishna at that time. And it was just a really great experience because I saw the festive atmosphere and the whole process of what happens when a statue is installed. It's a really grand occasion. They had a big procession through the Uti town and so on. And there were so many events. So it's I'm just got that image there. There's all the monks when they went on their procession. And it's just a very special experience for very young me, very exotic world I was finding myself in. And in the middle there, that's Swami Vireswaranandaji, the monk in the middle there holding the boy's hand. At that time, he was the president of Ramakrishna Order, and he was also a disciple of Holy Mother. He was a wonderful Swami. I got to spend some time with him. So look, I'm just in the context, this was all new to me, and it was really, really some wonderful experiences I had in this first visit to India. Then down on the right-hand corner there, that's an American lady, Jean Poley. Her husband was the America's naval attaché to India, if I remember correctly. Anyway, he was a senior official. She was a great devotee, and she was staying at the Belo Mat when I was there. And I tagged along with her. She went out for the day to all the places associated with Sri Ramakrishna in Calcutta. And the reason I'm saying all of that is, I think because of her, I got one really special experience. We visited Holy Mother's house, and we were taken upstairs by a Swami and sat down. And I didn't know what was going on. I'm just a young fellow. I'm just tagging along. And then the Swami started passing things around for us to hold. And I looked in my diary yesterday just to remind myself. What I got to hold was, one after another, was Holy Mother's bangles, her necklace and a bit of Holy Mother's hair. He was passing it around and we were holding them. You never happened now. You'd never be allowed to touch those now. But anyway, this was early enough. I went. And I knew back then, even though I was new, I knew this is really very, very special opportunity. And I think it's thanks to Vandana, who's a close devotee, that I managed to get that opportunity. So then we move on to the next slide, Fred. So then, after having come into contact with the Vedanta Society in Sydney in 1980, then gradually I started to hear that a nun is coming to start a centre in Sydney. And so I was there at the airport when Mataji and then Brahmacharini Girija Devi arrived. That's, of course, Gayatripana. They arrived in April in 1982. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Mataji because we've got the book, as you know, that's come out. I've given a lot of information there. But anyway, I'll share some fond memories and reflections. Well, in general, I could say that from the time I came into Mataji's orbit, my spiritual life deepened, of course. You know, she became my guru, and I had somebody watching over me and guiding me. But then my whole life experience expanded. Mataji'd often tease me. She'd say, when I came to her, I was completely raw, with a very narrow range of experience, and that was true. The first 10 years that Mataji was here, it was really a struggle. The three of us, Mataji, Gayatripana and I, we all lived very frugally. Every cent counted. And I've got to say, one of the happiest days was when we bought this hall, because when we bought this hall, it meant that we'd got out of the clutches of landlords. We were raising money. We were relying on donations. We were raising money from book sales. You know, and the hard-earned money of devotees, it was sad for that to end up in the pockets of landlords. So when we got this hall, it meant no more landlords. We'd already bought the house for the nuns a couple of years before, and it was a real turning point when we got this building, and we really felt like now we're getting established here. It was really wonderful being with Mataji, and the longer Mataji was here, I found we were coming into contact with an increasingly diverse range of people because, as you all know, Mataji was very active. We had a lot of activities, we were traveling a lot. And I've got to say, by the time Mataji returned to India in 2011, as her being his secretary, things had built up so much. It was really hard to keep up with all the correspondence, with all the invitations coming in for her to talk and for interviews. There was so many events and things happening around Mataji. And sadly, of course, as we know, her health was declining at that time, just when things were rising up to a bigger and greater peak. The other thing is that what really stands out for me is the sacrifice and dedication of Mataji. After going to India a couple of times, I was able to understand how much Mataji and Gayatripana had given up by coming here. Extraordinary that Mataji agreed to come, really. It was a really tough thing to do. And to build this centre up, very hard work, and very isolated she was in those first few years. You know, the communications with India back then was not so easy. The other thing about Mataji, as you know, she, I guess the way I put it, when it comes to guiding and helping people, her temperament was the tough love approach. You know, plenty of scoldings. You'd always know exactly what she thinks, and that'd be hard at times. But and sadly, some people took it in the wrong way and would take it too personally. But she's only that was her way, and there are various members in the order. They also had that way. Swami Vivekananda himself was of that temperament and approach. So we knew that, and actually you would welcome it after some time. The other thing, you go to the next slide, Fred. The other thing I really appreciate and value was the people I got to meet through being in contact with Mataji. And here I've just got a small collection. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, that's Dr. Raman Mara and his wife Sati. And he was always Mataji's host in Melbourne. In fact, he grew up just near where Mataji grew up in Kerala. And he, at that time, when he used to host us, at that time, he was actually the head of the Indian community in Victoria. You know, he was a very, you wouldn't know it to meet him, very significant person, but very humble. And so because he had such stature in Victoria, he would use his position to make sure Mataji got to participate in some very high-level events. One time, and I would tag along as Mataji's secretary, one time we were with the leaders of religion in Australia, all the main religious leaders, just Mataji in a room with them, and they had a kind of a one-day discussion. And that was through Dr. Mara's organizing. And so that was one way that actually Mataji came to be known to a lot of the religious leaders in this country. Middle one there, of course, that's Adelaide. You recognize the coups there. And Adelaide, Mataji went there countless times, and it's a very, very nice group there. And this is up on the coups. I've had a farm up in the Adelaide Hills. That was just an outing there, and a couple of the devotees there. On the bottom right-hand corner there, that's Dr. Ashim Majumdar and his wife Krishna. And they've got this palatial home in Brisbane. And I really appreciate what they did. What they would do each time Mataji visited Brisbane, they would use their home as a retreat for one day, as a venue for a retreat. It's a wonderful place, big rooms inside, very hospitable people. And interestingly, Dr. Majumdar quietly told us one day that his father was a disciple of Holy Mother. So, of course, he's very, very devoted. On the top right-hand corner, that lady there is our Nandu Mehta's sister, Geeta, and her husband, Dr. Sudhir Chatpa. And they've got a nice home up on the Gold Coast. So every time we'd go to Brisbane, we'd also go down the Gold Coast, and Geeta would cook all day and have a big group come in the evening for a talk and feed everybody. And that's really fond memories I've got of that. There in the middle, at the top there, that was a retreat we had up in the hills behind the Gold Coast. And this person here, you've probably heard of him, I imagine, Mahalingam Sinnathambi. He's been one of our greatest supporters since Mataji arrived. He's now, you won't mind me saying, he's one of the wealthiest people in the country. He's developed a veritable city to the southwest of Brisbane called Springfield. And we used to stay, in the early days going to Brisbane, we used to stay in his home. And so I got to spend quite a bit of time with him. He's quite a character, very interesting man, dynamo. Just go to the next slide, Fred. Not a lot more to say. No. I traveled overseas with Mataji. Of course, down in the bottom left-hand corner, that's with Mukti Pranaji. She was the first secretary, general secretary of Sri Sarada. And wow, she was really something, real powerful figure and very loving. That was a real honor to meet her a few times. In the middle there, were in America at Santa Barbara, and Mataji and Gayatripana, who Mataji worked with in Trishur, Sarada Mat for many years, they were the first nuns of Sri Sarada Mat to visit America. So it was quite an event. That was back in 1985. And the Swamis were very happy to have them and meet them. So that was a very fond memory. This one is in Sri Lanka. I went to Sri Lanka with Mataji a couple of times. Poignantly, that photo is just a few months after the tsunami, the Boxing Day tsunami. And as you might know, Sri Lanka was hit pretty badly. And we were over on the East Coast. This is at Batikola. And while Mataji was there, they got Mataji to participate in several events to hand out sewing machines, bicycles, clothing. These are little fishing boat canoes to the local people. And it was very confronting for us. We went to one school where a lot of the children in that school had been swept away, or they had their siblings swept away, or one or more of their parents swept away. Now, it was the atmosphere when we went to that event where Mataji handed out shoes and pens and other things to these children. It's very hard, it's very sad. We actually went a bit to the south of that area. There's Ramakrishna Order runs an orphanage. And the person managing the orphanage, he told us a very sad story. As you know, many of the buildings in India and Sri Lanka and Asia, they'll have a flat roof and they can go up on the roof and hang their clothing and so on. What he did was, the orphanage is right beside the seashore. And when the tsunami hit, he quickly took all the children for safety and got them up onto the roof because the water was swirling in down on the ground floor. And he saw, to his horror, there were bodies being swept along the laneway and the road beside the building. And so the children, he got them to sing bhajans and made sure they didn't see these bodies going past. Very good thinking, because they'd be traumatized. And we did meet one little boy, he would have been about 7, and he was playing with friends. And the water came, and he climbed up a palm tree, and he saw his friends swept away. And we saw him a few months after, and the look on his face, still there, this uncomprehending sort of shock on his face. We could see it. So anyway, that was a very, memorable visit. One other anecdote from that visit, this is very interesting. The night before, or the day before the tsunami hit, the locals were telling Mataji that they saw an old lady on the beach, and no one had ever seen her before. And she was warning, there's waves coming, there's waves coming. And nobody paid attention. They thought some crazy old lady. Next day, the waves hit. And then, so they had faith. They believed that she was from the local temple, the goddess from the local temple, come to warn them. Anyway, we don't know, but that's what they told us. Quite lady down there in the bottom right-hand corner, that's To Puan Umasambandhan. She was another standout figure that we got to spend a lot of time with. Her husband, this is in Malaysia, her husband was part of the first independent government in Malaysia when they gained independence. Her husband was one of the ministers. So very famous figure in the country and in contemporary Malaysian history. And she and he was a great devotee of Ramakrishna. The Ramakrishna Order Center in Kuala Lumpur is on land that he had set aside when he was the federal minister for lands and something else. He made sure that they had a center in a good area in Kuala Lumpur. We didn't get to meet him, he passed away, but she used to host Mataji in Kuala Lumpur. And what she would do, she's passed away now. In Malaysia, she was known from everybody from the king, prime minister down. They all knew her. She was famous. And she would deliberately use her position to get very significant people in Malaysia to meet Mataji, whoever she thought would be a bit responsive, especially any federal members of government who were women. A few times she'd get them to meet Mataji, leading business figures, and like that. When Nelson Mandela was freed and he went on his world tour, it turned out when he went to Malaysia on his world tour, we were there, and she arranged for Mataji to meet Nelson Mandela even. We didn't get any photos of that, sadly, but of course he knew about, Mataji talked to him, he knew about Ramakrishna Order because South Africa, they've got a long-standing centre there. So like that, one time she got the Australian ambassador to Malaysia to come and meet Mataji. That's Peter Verghese. He's quite well known here. He's back in Australia now. I think he's with University of Queensland. And that was very interesting. I found that was quite humorous in a way. He came and he spent quite a bit of time with Mataji. And while he was meeting with Mataji, this To Puan Umasambandhan, she gave him a brief history, a first-hand account of modern Malaysian history. She wanted him to know, and it was good for him to know because after all, he's the ambassador there, and it's good for him to know a bit, as much as he can, about modern Malaysia. And I tell you, I wish I'd recorded that. That was fascinating. She's been through it all. Malaysia's been through a lot of traumatic times during her lifetime. And she, being a senior figure, could give her own perspective on it. Anyway, then he talked with Mataji for a while, the ambassador, and then he became, all of this became so intriguing and interesting for him that he went and he left his coat behind. And after about 10 minutes, he had his driver had to bring him back and he had to get his coat. I remember that. That was interesting. All right, now I've talked enough about that, I think. Let's move on. Of course, with Mataji, a big thing that we got involved with so much was interfaith. And like I said, happily, Mataji became so well known and had so much contact with a lot of the senior leaders of faith in Australia. And as a result of that, when there was the World Youth Day in 2008, some of the organizers were good friends of Mataji, and they had some interfaith events. So when they were wondering about who to invite from Hinduism, then these organizers who knew Mataji said, we want Mataji there. So in that way, Mataji got to go for quite an intimate little event with the Pope of that time. And I tagged along as her secretary. Although the thing that happened was, it was when we got the invitation, I imagined it was going to be in St. Mary's Cathedral, and we'd be there along with about 800, 900 others. And what happened when we arrived and went through all the security, this is a little chapel behind St. Mary's Cathedral. Actually, Vivek Tucker was with us too, Dr. Vivek Tucker. So there were ladies serving morning tea, and I said to Mataji, oh, that's nice, we'll have some morning tea and then we'll go up into the cathedral. And they were serving us morning tea in here, and then I was looking around and I asked the organizers what's happening here. They said, oh, there'll be a meeting with the Pope in here. And I thought, oh, okay, there's something else happening afterwards. And then I realized, no, this is where we are having the meeting with the Pope. As you see, there's only just a small group. And then the other thing, I was sure then that Mataji would meet the Pope, which she did. But then I saw everybody else was lining up. And so then I asked, what are you doing? What are you lining up for? They said, oh, we all have to meet the Pope. And then I realized then and there, oh, I'm going to have to meet the Pope. Anyway, that was just one of those things with Mataji. Being with Mataji, you never knew what experiences you were going to have. So now, Fred, if you could move on to the next one. Now, during Mataji's stay here, there were two very challenging times we went through. In 2006, Mataji had a complication, a twisted bowel, and she had to have a big operation, and that's the surgical team who actually saved her life. And we were so frightened about the operation, but we realized it wasn't the operation we had to worry about, it was the recovery. And Mataji was so weakened by the operation unavoidably. And so the danger was if she got infection, it could be enough for her not to survive. So for about 6 weeks, we were on tenterhooks. And as many of you know, the hospital kindly allowed us to have a roster. We had devotees with Mataji 24 hours a day. And they were very helpful because whenever anybody came into the room, there were so many specialists and others going through, and they'd take notes to keep track of everything that was happening, because sometimes you'd find communication would break down within the hospital, and they'd be sitting there and they'd have the notes and they'd pop up and help the people working in the hospital sometimes. But it was only because we sensed if anything went wrong, she may not survive. And happily, and that's Dr. Biswas there. He, our close devotee, he's passed away a few years back. He was the chief anaesthetist in Concord Hospital at that time. And he also was invaluable having him there. That was a blessing. We think he's a large part of why Mataji managed to get through that. Down the bottom right-hand corner there was another, 2011 was another very challenging time. Mataji, in April, we were going for our daily walk, and she told me quietly, I'm planning to go back to India. And I was shocked. There's no inkling, no idea that there was ever going to be that plan. She decided to because her health was becoming more delicate, and she knew it was going to be a bit easier back in India. There's more resources there, more nuns there. So then we had a very sad year, really. Mataji made a point of going around the whole country and taking leave of everybody. And I've got to say, it's traumatic. It was traumatic. I found it very difficult. A lot of very sad people, and having to face that and console them. And I took a lot of that in. And a very, very difficult year. And actually, Mataji, she didn't quite realize, but I understood what was happening. It was having such a big impact on her, and it was making her health even worse. So I got very anxious towards the end whether she was going to make it back to India because she was getting so sick. Anyway, she got back, and there she is. She's back at the center she started before coming to Sydney in Travancore, Ramakrishna Sarada mission there. And as we know, happily, she had many years of service in India. Her health picked up when she got back there, and for another 10 years, she was very active there, and a big blessing for everyone back in India. So we're very happy about that. Just go to the next slide, Fred. Now, other highlight of my years with Vedanta has got to be this. And if I get it right, I think Mataji asked Madhu Sen, who's here, to do a play on Swami Vivekananda. And Madhu took it up. And Madhu managed to book the Sydney Opera House. And you don't just wander in there and make a booking. You've got to present a whole case and convince them that you're going to do something that's of a proper standard for it's a world icon. So having managed to book the Sydney Opera House, then Madhu realized, my goodness, got to really do something special. And so she got a hold of Alex Brun. There's Alex there. And he's a very experienced person with theatrical things. And he really helped us to lift the whole production to a professional level. And I got to see, and Madhu, we all got to see firsthand what a really professional production is like. And it was really interesting, quite inspiring. There's a real buzz around it. And I admired how dedicated, there's a lot of the actors there in that photo. We took them for a retreat to Robertson. But these professional actors I was really impressed how deeply they would go into the characters they have to portray. We were being bombarded with questions. The top photo there was when we were, every night, for many nights, we sat together and went through the script. And I live here, so anyway, this is where they were having the meeting. So I became like an advisor, and they'd ply me with questions. You know, who's Kali? What do you mean by illumination? And so on and so on. You have to fill in, to give them a quick education. And it was quite funny. It was quite bemused. One night, the level of detail they would go into. One night there were arguments about how you're going to pronounce Dakshineswar. Are they going to do it in the Bengali way? Are they going to do it in the English way? You know, I mean, just an example, the level of detail. And Alex Bruin, in the end, became such an expert on Swami Vivekananda his whole life. He was correcting us, you know, when particular events occurred, what happened in that event. He started telling us. So the other thing was, that sticks in my mind, when they got to the stage of the dress rehearsals, the first morning here when they started their dress rehearsals, I was out in the kitchen and I'm standing there working away, and I heard somebody walk in, and I turned around, and here was Swami Vivekananda in the kitchen with me, because Shaheb Chatterjee, for the first time, he had dressed as Swami Vivekananda, and he looked like Swami Vivekananda. And I just did a double take. When he came, he proudly came and stood in the kitchen to show me. Just one other anecdote I found interesting with these actors. They were rehearsing scenes here in the hall. And one time I wandered over, one scene had just finished, and one actor was kind of crouched down at the end of the scene. And I went over to talk to him. And when I said something to him, he jumped. And then I realized that when they go really deep into character and into the scene, they are so at one with that. And I realized you don't disturb them. You've got to leave them for some time, and they gradually come out of that. And the actors told me they particularly liked being in this play because they were portraying very positive things. All of them have had to play roles in plays with very dark themes, very troubled characters. And I was discussing about that with them. They have to be able to, they have to identify themselves fully with that character and the scene, and yet they've got to come out of that. And they can't let it go too deeply into them. And it's very difficult. And this is why I realized then, this is why you find some of these professional actors can have a lot of psychological problems, because it's very hard to manage that. So they were saying, look, this is wonderful. It's putting out so many positive things into our minds. Just go to the next slide. And so there's the main poster we had. And then the other thing that went so well with this production, I had a contact in the ABC, Dr. Rachel Cohn. She was the head of the religious department at that time. We knew her because she knew Mataji. We'd met her a few times. And she knew about Swami Vivekananda. She had gone to Chicago when they had the centenary celebration of the World Parliament of Religions in 1993. And there she heard about Swami Vivekananda and became quite fascinated by him. So early in the year leading up to the play, I happened to meet her, and I told her this is coming up. So she said, keep me informed. Many times they just say that, and I didn't know whether she'd follow through, but boy, she did. And what she did was, her weekly program, 1 hour program, she devoted the whole program to the play. She came here and met some of the actors and interviewed a few of us. And then what she did was, in the days leading up to the first performance, I found she was popping up on many different ABC programs and pushing it. And our ticket sales were just booming. She was just giving it a big push. And finally, a few days out from the play, if you went to the ABC Radio National website, that's what you saw when you opened it up. The first thing you saw was Swami Vivekananda, and she'd done a big write-up. So that was just infinitely helpful for us and very encouraging. So then just go to the next slide. Now we're going to be winding up. Not responding? Should be. Oh, okay. Look, this is a scene from the play. Yeah. I don't know. So it didn't automate. All right.
Well, it looks like it would, but I'll check that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, this was our final visit to Mataji, as happily many of us went to visit Mataji after she returned to India. And this turned out, I think some other devotees came and saw her, but after this visit, certainly for me and all of us there in the photos, it's the last time we got to be with Mataji. I was booked to go in March 2020, but of course COVID scuttled that. On this visit, you could see that Mataji, the end was coming. I have a very poignant memory of that visit. Mataji, by now, she couldn't walk around. She'd have to go in a wheelchair. So my fond memory for me, one of the final memories, was wheeling Mataji around in the garden there, just the two of us, and having a bit of time together. And I'm thinking this might be the last time. But like I said, I was hoping to go in March, but it wasn't to be. But I've got to say, apart from the being very grieving when Mataji passed away, I've got to say, though, the way she passed away, I think is wonderful. And I think you would have read that she was conscious and she was ready to go, and things were getting complicated. They were putting her on dialysis, and she told the nuns, I'm going. I think in a very, very Mataji, very organized way, even her own passing, she did it the way she wanted. And it's a very smooth exit. And the nuns were there and chanting, and it was a really beautiful passing. So I, for one, take a lot of consolation in that she was surrounded by, she was in the Ramakrishna Mission Hospital. Swami in charge was there. So she had the best of care, and the nuns were with her. So really, what a nice way to leave, to pass away. So I think that's enough. It's taken a lot of time. Thanks for your patience. Now we've got an opportunity for any of you to come up and share some memories, thoughts.
Pranams, Mataji, nuns, devotees, and friends. I'll just say a few words. I think, our family's had a very long association with the society and with Mataji. I always find these talks hard. I can't express enough gratitude to Mataji, the society, and our parents for introducing us to this way of life from such an early age. Today, on the celebration of Guru Purnima, I really just want to acknowledge our beloved Reverend Gayatripana Mataji, our Guru. We've been very blessed to have been bestowed with this honor. And I think Gayatripana Mataji said it best when she said, our Guru is our God, which just demonstrates, I guess, the magnitude of that honor. My earliest recollection of the order are the Mataji, but also of Gayatripana Mataji, Pregna Pranaji at the time, Lalita and Robert, when we were back in the prior nunnery in Burwood, when we were very little. I remember that place quite distinctly. We would walk down the side of the house, up the ramp, we would take off our shoes. But next to the place was a cupboard which had all these comics and storybooks. And that was probably the start of my infatuation and love of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Panchachantra tales and stories of Birbal. The constants in our life, I would say, through all of that was for about 35 years, had to have been Mataji, Gayatripana Mataji and Robert. And I really just want to acknowledge each of them for what they've done for us for so long. Through all the ups and downs, it's always been a safe place, a place of peace, and a place where I would say my head and my heart meet, surrender, and listen. So today, I just want to express our love and gratitude from our family to them all. Nuns.
Gayatripana, Pravrajikas and friends, it's a real privilege to be here today. And Robert, that was an excellent talk. I really enjoyed listening to that. There's a lot of things that I've learned from Mataji and other Swamis, but I'm not going to tell you all the lessons because they're all in books. But I'll tell you something very funny, what I think was funny, because I served under Swami Pramathananda when I was at the Vedanta Center in Toronto, and he's a very caring and sensitive man. And this was very amusing. I was on the executive committee then, and there was a man who used to volunteer, and he used to always do work. He used to like doing work, but the Swami didn't allow him to do any vigorous work. And I used to wonder, why doesn't he want him to do that? And I asked another person in the executive committee, he gets him to do other things, but not vigorous work. And he said to me, that's because he wears a wig, and he didn't want him to lose his wig when he was hammering, doing intense hammering. That's why he didn't want you to do it. I said, okay. So I just wanted to share something funny rather than tell you something more than anything. But there is a sense of humor about the society too. And there is a lot of care thought into it, but sometimes the care could be somewhat funny as well. So
For Nuns, really do. Yeah, we owe our family owe our lives to our family owe our lives to the order, right from the beginning. I think just regardless, like say what circumstances anyone be in, the order, like whether it be Guru Pravrajika, Mataji, Gayatripana Mataji, or Robert there. Sort of instruct us with a lot of poise and calmness as well. It was made it very clear to us as well to take in instructions and follow them even in most difficult times. Also like one thing to just really acknowledge is the selfless service they provide as well. One thing which I sort of really appreciate is the effort they've put in, especially in those Friday night discussions. There's just a lot of effort. The initiative which was taken, especially I think with Robert, like preparing the material making so clear and organized, and so need for people to follow and keep as a repository as well, just to go back and refer to. And even when there's material which is uploaded now, say even if while Pravrajika Gayatripana is physically not here, sometimes the messages which, the videos which Robert uploaded is at the time, they seem very timely as well, as if she's always here instructing us. So yeah, we're always very, very thankful to yourselves and the order in general for the help you give us in facilitating, well, just managing ourselves, just dealing with day-to-day lives a bit, also helping us like grow spiritually as well.
Anyone else like to say some? Oh, yes, Robert.
Sorry, feel very comfortable in Bengali, but still I'm trying to speak in English. First, I want to say pranam to my parents who gave me the birth in this wonderful world. They are my first guru. And then the teacher, that which I learned to pray my pranam to them too. And thirdly, when people grow up, then they try to search for a guru. Still I'm searching, but just like Mataji told a few minutes ago, the guru is that person who connects you with the God. And in my definition, when you have a critical time, then you find God. So I had so many critical time in my life. And that dark time, some people came. And in that context, I want to highlight Mataji, Sri Gayatripana Mataji. I think not officially, but unofficially, she is my guru because she showed me the light at the end of the dark place, dark way. And now I want to say my pranam to Gayatripana Mataji. And currently, still I am traveling through a dark time, but I never fear. I always see the light of happiness. And for that, I also want to say thank you to Gayatripana Mataji and Sridharapana Mataji. You also my guru, and you are still continuing showing the light of the darkness, which I can see every time. So pranam Mataji.
Pranam Mataji. As you know, Adesh has just told, and he as well as the Vivek, both the children were coming here since before they started to learn even the writing or reading. Vivek had been coming from the year 5, once he was 5 years old, and Adesh was only 3 or something. And gradually they grew up, and both were initiated by the Mataji. And my main reason was bringing them was here we were just the nuclear family, myself and my wife, and there was no other people here. And I said, unless they get some religious background, these children will go either on the drugs or something, then life will be more miserable than you left in India. And they were very much involved in it. Now also they are coming. Now Adesh has started bringing his own children also. But that time they had quite a few children. So there was a Gayatripana and other nuns were running the children classes. And that was quite a lot for them. And it has helped them. Right now, even Mataji also, I used to come here and sit here, and then they used to go at a nunnery and they were learning there. And I think that has made a lot of difference in them, and hopefully it will continue with their children also. Over the years, that shows Ades is now nearly around 38, 40. So they have been coming since 35 years, and I'm also coming here for same number of years. And hopefully they will continue. And I see all those people who are coming, they have done very well in their life, and they have prospered. And we saw the Mataji, I think, with Robert in 2014, roughly, I think. And the one which was shown here about Swami Ranganathan, I remember when we met at Swami Ranganathan at a Five Dog, Mr. Bhatt's house. His daughter was a dentist, and Mr. Bhatt has passed away, and Vivek was only 1 year old. And that time he had taken him in his lap, Swami Ranganathananji, and he was blessed by that. And about that Ray Martin show also, I was there. I was watching that, and he asked him, "How do you say that everybody can reach to the divine?" And so, Swamiji's reply was, "Everybody has a potential." And he said, "How you prove?" And he brought the meat stick and say, "So unless you strike the matchstick on the right surface, the potential is there, but there is no fire." And that was all over the world was conveyed, and it is still remaining in my mind. And I had known when I was 13 years or something, we were taught the English very late as a one subject. And we just started learning. And that time I got a small booklet of the Swami Vivekananda my brother had brought. And one sentence was there. It was written on the top of the book. He is not the atheist who doesn't believe in God, but who is the atheist who doesn't believe in himself. And that stuck to my mind forever. And I still remember I had to look up in the dictionary what is the atheist and all those things, because being a second language, we were very poor on that one. And after coming here also, we used to find it difficult. But all this has helped here, and it has given a lot of strength in our difficulties. Instead of going on the wrong path, we have been blessed with this ashram. And Mataji had asked me to join that time, but I said, look, before you people came, I was more involved with the self-realization. So that is why then she said, look, we can't take you in that. But still, I do come, and I still enjoy this and continue to do so till I end. Thank you, Mother.
Well, thank you for those contributions. Just a few announcements, then we'll wind up. As you should all be knowing, there's a book full of reminiscences of Mataji from devotees in Australia and India. That's available. Many of us have contributed to this book. And then just recently, this new one, Vedanta in Practice, Spiritual Unfoldment, it's transcribes. Many of the talks Mataji gave in Malaysia have been transcribed, plus a couple of talks in India. So yeah, it's really, really very well done. Very nice talks she used to give there. Very practical. So they're available in the bookshop. We've got donation plate there, and donation box up the back. And because of COVID, we're not having the big lunch program we used to have. Everybody's staying back. We're just going to be a bit careful until things settle down. So they're prepared food packets, which you can get out from the side here as you go out. You can get a food packet as you're leaving. So thank you for coming in spite of flu and COVID rampaging around at the moment. I mean, like I said, happily the weather is on our side today. Very actually warm out there, I think. And thanks to those joining us via Zoom. I believe Sarada Mangala from America, all the way from California, is there as well. So welcome. So now we conclude.